So when we're talking about virtual appliances and we're talking about virtualizing our data, we need to talk about on-site versus off-site. Now, on-site versus off-site may mean a couple of things depending on our scenario, but let's take a look at what those different couple of things may mean. Now, our on-site versus off-site, what we're talking about here is the difference between if our service is hosted in-house versus in the cloud. So if our service and our product or our servers or applications are hosted by us, if we manage our own servers and manage our own staff and manage all the applications ourselves, or if we outsource that to someone else. That's what we're talking about here on on-site versus off-site. On-site versus off-site may also refer to our data backups, where we back them up to an off-site location. We back them up to a physically different location. Now, this physically different location may still be managed by us, may still be managed by our staff and our employees and our servers and our hardware. So there's two distinctions there. There's the on-site versus off-site. That means we're giving up the control of this to someone else and we're paying them to manage this for us. And then there's the on-site versus off-site that simply means this particular application is at a different geographical location, but we're still managing it. So we need to understand those two differences when we're referring to it. Mainly what we're going to be talking about here is our first distinction of on-site versus off-site, where we are passing off this service, we're passing off the control to a different company, to a different different provider, which is going to do all the management, is going to do all the magic for us, and then we're just going to pay them, and what we're going to see is pretty transparent. So in this situation, our on-site is going to provide us with the pro of having a faster response and more control. So let's say that we're providing an off-site or in the cloud website hosting service. So we started up our own small company, we have our own little business, and we want to provide people with a website that they can come to and they can find out some information about us. Now, if we have an on-site web server, then we have a faster response and more control, because if we want to make a change or if we want something to be changed differently, we can just do that right now. We can walk over to our web server, we can log into our web server, and we can make that change. If that web server goes off or goes down, then we can walk over to it and we can replug in the network cable, or we can press the power button. If this is an off-site service, if we notice something that we want to change, or if we notice something that needs to be fixed and we don't necessarily have the control over it, maybe we don't have the logins to change certain credentials, or we don't have certain permissions to change certain aspects of the site, then we may need to send an email to somebody, or we may need to call up somebody. And even if it's a very quick response, they have a 24/7 call center that we call up and they make the changes right there, we've still got to call and we've got to wait and we've got to let the changes apply. Whereas if it's an on-site situation, we can just go and make those changes ourselves. That brings us to our next observation of on-site, is that our business continuity implications. Now, when we're talking about business continuity, we're talking about what happens, how do we make sure that no matter what, our business keeps working like it should. We keep providing the services to our customers like we should. We need to make sure that even if one of our offices has some flooding, or maybe there's severe weather that keeps anybody from coming in, or maybe we have a power outage, we still want business continuity. We still want people to be able to get to our website and browse our products. So if we have all of our services on site and the building goes up in flames, or we have flooding, or there's a major weather event that takes out all the power for several hours, and then all of our battery backups run out because they only work for 3 or 4 hours, then our service is no longer provided. Contrast this to off-site. If our business were to shut down for the day because of weather, then that off-site service would still be able to provide the service. People would still be able to get to our website because it's not hosted on our site. It's somewhere else. If we're giving our off-site control to a very large organization, they may actually have multiple sites with failover clustering and different hot sites. So even if one of their sites is hit by a meteor and or burns down, then they have a separate site where all of their data is backed up to, and once it detects that that other site is down, it's going to kick in and provide us with increased business continuity. We're going to still have, customers are still going to be able to get to that website website, and the customers are still going to be able to browse our products or access their data. So our on-site, we also have our staff and training. If we're hosting our own web server on-site, then we're going to have someone that we hire or that we pay to come in occasionally who manages that. Now, we mentioned earlier that our on-site provides us with faster response and more control. If we want someone to be able to, at the drop of a hat, change something on our web server, we need to have that person full-time in-house. So that requires additional payment, that requires additional staff and increased training, and the more someone knows, then more than likely that the higher the price tag comes with that person. Whereas if we are having this service in the cloud, if we have our web server offsite, then that offsite service may have 50 full-time employees that manage 300 websites. Because they aren't constantly having to work on one single website, they can work on those different websites at different times. Whereas our one on-site person may only work on the website 2 hours out of an 8-hour day. Even if the off-site person is less skilled and works on our website 3 hours out of the 8-hour day, they still have 5 additional hours where they work on other websites. So we need, for our on-site, we need additional staff and additional training, and if we're just a small shop with a website that doesn't need to be changed except once or twice a week, then we don't want to be paying someone full-time in order to manage that website. And we may not want to have to wait for someone to come in or have to log in remotely or have to call a single person on the phone in order to manage our website. So we take our web service and we put it off-site, give it to someone else who has a 24/7 call center, has 24/7 support, where we can just call up their company and they have one of their employees who's trained make the changes for us. And next we have our off-site. Now our off-site is maybe very excellent for data backups especially. If we have a lot of data, if we have data that we want to make sure it stays secure and is good even if our site floods or goes up in flames, then that off-site location is where we would want to put some data backup. Now, if we, and this is going to be our respect where we're also going to be talking about if we have multiple different locations. If we manage and we have control over multiple different locations with different servers, then we may just take our own backups and then tell them to back up to this off-site location. And we don't have to pass off control of our data to someone else. We just keep our own in-house control, but we save that data on an off-site location. So that's where our data backups come in. Our data backups can be both our own off-site control or someone else's off-site control. Offsite data backups may also come in the form of your own home computers. If you have a home computer or a laptop that you want to back up the data, well, you can back up that data to an external hard drive, and then you have that on a separate physical location than your computer. But if both your computer and your external hard drive are kept in your same computer bag in your car and someone steals that computer bag, then they now have your computer and they also have your backups. But if you have a service that provides you with off-site backups, if you have some sort of online service that you plug in your computer and they automatically back up all of your data, then that's going to be an off-site service that's going to do that for you. And then they'll manage your data, they'll keep it secure, and even if your laptop bag gets stolen and they take your laptop and your hard drive, then your data can still be recovered because it was saved to an off-site location. That's a lot easier than finding a family member who lives in a different state that you can set up some sort of VPN connection to them, and you can back up all your data to them and they back up all your data to you, and that would be a very ingenious setup, but it would be easier for someone who doesn't know how to do all that setup. It would be easier to manage and just a little bit easier on all the setup and all the maintenance to have a single service that manages huge data centers where you back up all your data to. And then with offsite, you also have the connection delay. Now, one of the downsides with our offsite connection is, like we said with our data backups, if you download your data to a single hard drive or you back up your servers to a network attached storage device, then that connection is going to be really quick. That data backup is going to be pretty quick because you're connected to it locally, you're connected right there. But if you're backing up your data to a provider out on the internet where you're plugging in your network cables, going to your switch, going to your router, going through your internet service provider, going all the way to that service provider, that data backup service provider, you may have to plug in your laptop and let it back up data for 4 hours when it does a full backup, or even longer. The first time it does a full backup, they may say, plug in your computer, plug it into the internet, and depending on your network speed, it can take anywhere from depending on your network speed and the amount of data you have to back up, it may take anywhere from 4 hours to 2 days. So then those offsite backups, that connection delay may get really strenuous. Every time you try to do a computer backup, it takes 3 hours for it to back up all your data because you make so many changes. So that's another consideration to take into effect. Even with a web application that you host somewhere else, if you host your website, then you have that connection delay. If you're trying to log into that web server so that you can make changes, say you have your web server hosted somewhere else, but you do all the maintenance locally, you do all the changes yourself, then you're going to have to log in, you're going to have to wait for that connection delay as you make those changes on that remote web server. So there's that consideration to take into effect. With offsite, you also have to think about information control. If you're backing up your data to an offsite location, you're going to have to trust them because they now have your data. So they may provide password protection, they may provide encryption services. You may want to encrypt your data locally and then back up your encrypted data to that service. But if it's something like a website that this additional company can manage, you're now entrusting them with the security and the management of your brand recognition. If your company gets pretty big and your company website is being viewed by a lot of people, all it would take is depending on the company, depending on the service that's hosting your website, all it may take is a single employee there at that company saying, you know what, I'm just going to take all of these websites and I'm going to put up trash on their homepage, and I'm going to put up viruses that download automatically when someone tries to connect in. Or maybe this website hosting service doesn't have very good security on their servers. These website hosting services are going to be targeted very heavily by people trying to maliciously infect their servers, because these malicious attackers know that these web hosting services host multiple different websites. So if they can get into one of these servers, if they can figure out a way to break into these servers, then they can have a playground, and they have a very large distribution point for malware or viruses. So you have to be very careful, because once your customers say, hey, every time I go to your website, my antivirus pops and says that you're trying to download a virus to me, then they may stop visiting your website, and that hurts your company. So you have to take that into consideration, but you also have to understand that if these large companies may be better suited to manage your security. While you may be passing off your brand recognition to them, their servers, they have staff that is trained to keep their servers secure. They're constantly on top of making sure that all the patches are applied and all the security is up to date, whereas your one part-time staff member who's in charge of your local web server may not be up to all that. They may not have the training, they may not have the skills necessary to make sure your web server is locked down properly and that it has all the most current patches and is protected against all the most recent security threats. So you need to weigh both options, knowing that your on-site option may be less secure than an off-site option, or that off-site option you may not be willing to pass that data on to them. Now, I have over here in our little box a little analogy: our FedEx /UPS versus Michael Scott with the van. Now, for those of you that may watch the American version of The Office, there was an episode where Michael Scott started his own paper company, and he was delivering, and he was himself taking the paper, putting it in a van, and delivering it to all of his customers. This may be your small shop with your own in-house hosted web server. You're taking your own information, you're loading it onto your own server, and you're delivering it to all your customers. Now, this was great at first. It saved on costs. He didn't have to cut a check to different drivers and different vans. He didn't have to pay a large shipping company. He didn't have to have FedEx or UPS deliver out all of his paper. He could do it all himself, save on some costs. But then he started to get more clients. He was able to offer paper for less, so more people went with him over the larger companies. But that means he now has more paper he has to deliver. Now, he can't do this all himself. You may have your small web server that can only manage 200 clients connected to it at the same time successfully. But then as your company grows, you notice at peak hours, you're bumping right along at almost 350 people. And you start getting complaints that your web page won't load, or you're getting a message stating that there's too many connections connected, or that it's really slow trying to navigate through your web page. Or in this case with Michael Scott and his van, you have to tell customers, okay, I can only deliver to your site once a week because I have to go to all of these different companies all the time and deliver paper. So it's affecting your business, having limited resources. So what you do is you pass that on. Instead of hiring your own drivers, instead of hiring your own team in order to manage a much larger web server, you'd be paying a lot more money to do that yourself. If Michael Scott were to try to go out and buy 4 or 5 large trucks and pay 4 or 5 different drivers in order to deliver that paper, it wouldn't be very feasible. You'd be paying the check, or you'd be paying salary plus benefits to all of the different people managing your web servers. You'd be paying for the multiple web servers that you have hosted. If something goes down, then you're wasting time on site. So you're paying a lot of money to manage your own web servers, and you're paying a lot of money for for individual employees to receive training and work on your web servers and keep them up and running. So you're putting out a lot of money just to host a website. But what you may spend $100,000 setting up and doing, larger companies that may host your website for you may be able to do this for pennies on the dollar. They already have huge data centers where they can scale resources for different websites depending on the different traffic at different times per day. They already have the employees. They have 50 website technicians that work on 200 different websites that they host, but only require different amounts of attention at different times. So you're paying them $39.95 a month to host the website for what would cost you multiple thousands of dollars a year, not only to buy the equipment and maintain the equipment, but to also pay someone to keep it up to date and manage it. So rather than going out and paying for the trucks and paying for the drivers, Michael Scott may just start paying to have boxes of paper shipped from already existing large companies. And it would save him money, because even though you're paying someone else to do what you technically could do, it would cost you a lot more money and a lot more time to do that than just passing the cost off to someone else who already has the large-scale resources to do that. If you're a company that manufactures a product, you're not going to hire Bob with a pickup truck to deliver that product all across the United States. You're going to take your product and you're going to give it to FedEx or UPS to deliver it across the world. And it's not because you don't trust Bob with a pickup truck, but it would take a lot more resources for you if a single order of a $12 tool for him to drive it all the way across the United States would cost a lot more than $12. Whereas if you just pay a couple dollars shipping to have it processed across the United States, then it saves you on costs. It's the same thing with on-site versus off-site solutions. So let's take a look at our very, very simple diagram we have here. Here we have a simple solution where we have our company with our couple computers, and then we have our off-site backups or off-site data storage. Now we'll just have this here to implement or show some of our pros and cons. With our on-site, if we had our on-site data storage here, then all it would take is our building to collapse or a fire or some sort of natural disaster, and we've lost all of our data. Not only have all of our computers been lost, but our data backup has also been lost as well. And then if we have an offsite backup, if our single on-site location is destroyed, then our offsite backups are still good. And then our con of our offsite backups would be that we have our internet links here and here. All it would take is, say if this company went out of business or this company decided to start reading our data, then we would need to make sure that we encrypted our data before we passed it off to them. We would need to make sure that we took extra time to do our backups because it has to go from our location to our router over the internet and then over to them, so it takes a lot longer for the data to back up. So just a very simple drawing for our data backups. So it's important to understand our difference in on-site versus off-site when we're talking about our different applications, our data, our services, and how we use them, and also understanding the benefits of on-site versus off-site, and how even though we're passing off a service that we could do ourselves to someone else, it can still save us time and still save us money over hosting it ourselves.